Good morning and good day to everyone, right? And welcome to Frost Sullivan Cybersecurity webinar. So we have a different series for cloud security and some application security in 2025, and this will be the first session that we are holding for this year. So our security webinar provide you with the insightful information about current issues in cybersecurity that helps inform the CISOs and some other security professionals responsible for protecting their cloud and the organization and so the cloud infrastructure and applications as well. Our session today is about the cloud and application detection and investigation and response, and how cloud security operations are being transformed with the CNADR. So we will have the new term CNADR, right, standing for Cloud Native Application Detection and Response. Okay, so first, so my name is Tien, and I'm a principal analyst at Frost Sullivan Cybersecurity team, and I'm leading Frost Sullivan Cloud and Application Security research globally. I have been the author of several cloud security and application security reports that have been published recently, including CSPM, CNAPP, CNAPP, Cloud Application Runtime Security, and among others, right? And I will be the moderator today. So before we start the discussion, I would like our speakers, including Shira, Shauli, and Stav, to give a brief introduction about themselves, right? So first, we start with Shira, right? Shira, can you give them some brief introduction about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Tien. Thanks, Hannah. I'm Shira Bendkowski. I'm VP Product for Aqua Security. I lead the cloud runtime and AI security part of the platform. I've been in the cyber industry for around 50 years or so, a little bit over, different aspects, different realms of it, and I'm very excited to be here in this important discussion today.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks. Shauli, can you? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Shauli Rozen, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of ARMO. ARMO specializes in runtime, cloud, and Kubernetes security, and we've created the first open source driven behavioral application detection and response, application and cloud detection and response.
Perfect. Thank you. And Stav, can you wrap up this introduction?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Stav Sitnikov. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief product officer at Stream. We help enterprise organizations transform the way that they do cloud detection and response.
Thank you. So thank everyone for joining us today. So before we start the webinar conversation, so I would like to quickly provide some context, right, for today's session with some kind of research from Frost Sullivan. So our session today is about the modern cloud security, right? And so how the concept of the cloud native application detection and response can help to set up the security operations, and also the SOC teams detect, investigate, and respond to the cloud threats effectively, right? We will focus on the three key areas, including the challenges that organizations are facing today. We will discuss a little bit about solutions that can be used to address the challenges, and some recommendation from our speakers today, right? So with that, we would like to share some statistical research for our session. So the first one is let's go to some research data about the cloud adoption globally, right? So we see that over the past few years, the adoption of cloud services had rapidly increased globally, right? Particularly, we have seen the soaring adoption of the hybrid and multi-cloud service model. So in 2024, right, Frost Sullivan research found out that 40% of the organization or respondents indicating that they see cloud or view cloud along with the AI and the ML as the most important technology to achieve their business priorities, right? As it has driven the adoption of cloud service model over the last few years. The research so that the majority of the respondents have either see the is an adopted cloud-first strategy, or they see the cloud as the most critical part of their digital transformation journey, and also organizations need to require the deployment of the cloud as the cloud or the multi-cloud, and also the hybrid cloud strategy ASAP, right, or as soon as possible to successfully drive their cloud and so the business strategy. So coupled with that, we also see that like a cloud native application, right? We found that almost 57% of the organization now are using, 57% of the business application right now are cloud native. It means that organizations are using more cloud native architectures, technology to build the app. And like almost 100% of the application right now, new applications are cloud native. This means that organizations are using the cloud and cloud native technologies, right, is more than ever, right? And we forecast that in the next 2 years, organizations will continue to modernize their infrastructure and business applications by using the cloud native technologies, right? They also highlighted the importance of the cloud and cloud native technologies for organization business. We also have an increasingly important role in driving their cybersecurity strategy, right? It has become one of the important factors affecting or driving their cybersecurity initiative. In fact, cloud security, including the application and data security, in the cloud remain the biggest concern among all the organizations when migrating to the cloud, right? And we see that this is the biggest concern for organizations when migrating to cloud, right? However, we also see that organizations continue to face mounting challenges, right, in their cloud security operations, right, especially for the cloud native threat detection and response, right? Our latest cloud application runtime security research found out that SecOps often face of the following challenges in dealing with the cloud threats, right? You can see on the screen, we see the rising complexity of the cloud native environment, the increasing attack surface in the cloud, the constantly evolving threat landscape, and also the lack of the visibility into the cloud native runtime threats, and how organization can unable to do the threat or the risk prioritization, the threat prioritization, and they are overwhelmed with the alert, causing the alert fatigue, right? But how to improve the cloud SecOps, right? It become a big problem because there are a lot of barriers in here. We see that organizations need to face a lack of human resources, also relevant knowledge, expertise, and experience to the cloud security operations. We see that our organization continue to face a lack of budget for cloud security operations, the right cloud security solutions, right? And the effectiveness of current security solution, where organizations continue to use the legacy solution that are designed for the on-prem security, which are not relevant and effective in detecting and responding to the cloud threats. We also see that organizations are facing the challenges in terms of the visibility, because they are using a fragmented tools, which is leading to the fragmented visibility, right? Because of the fragmented visibility is also causing them losing. They don't have the contextual actionable insights. And of course, last but not least, which is very, very important here, that we see the lack of the team collaboration, right? With organizations that have the different teams, like SecOps, DevOps, the developers, the cloud sec, and the application security teams, they do not have the collaboration culture. They do not have the good practice, right, in there. So causing the slow response to the threats, right, and some ineffective threat response, right? And because of this, we actually at Frost Sullivan envision unified runtime security platforms that integrate CDR, ADR, and other runtime focused security functionalities like a CNAPP, NEDR, or cloud vulnerability protection and endpoint detection response. right? So CNADR, or we call it a CNADR, right? CNADR, Cloud Native Application Detection and Response. So it leverages multiple detection and response detection methods to offer a holistic view of across the cloud infrastructure, the workload, for example, like a virtual machine, the container, Kubernetes environment, and so on, serverless function and application. Right? It consolidates diverse data stream, including the cloud logs, event, API, and traffic logs, right? Workload, activity, and application behavior into a unified data lake and response framework, right? Enabling real-time monitoring, comprehensive visibility, and also advanced analysis, right? This have like SecOps team to detect and respond to the threats effectively, right? They will have the comprehensive visibility into the evolving threat landscape. They understand the potential attack paths, understand the lateral movement, and so the blast various threats, right? CNAPP, because of this, so CNAPP can be integrated seamlessly with existing SecOps workflow and also risk management tools and workflow, right? This helps the SecOps team or SOC team detect, investigate, and respond, right, effectively to the threats in the cloud native environment. So the unified approach to the incident response and also the detection and investigation ensure that security and operation teams collaborate effectively, reducing the risk of like misconfiguration, compliance violation, and also the threat detection, like capability. Okay, so with that, Shira, Stav, and Shauli, I will start with the first question. So you can see that like when I show on the screen about challenges, right? When we talk about the like cloud detection and response or application detection and response. So we see that migrating to the cloud is now like inevitable, but most organizations face significant challenges in protecting their cloud environment, right? Especially when it comes to the cloud native threat detection response. We talk about the real-time threat detection response. So the first question is, what are the key challenges facing organizations in the cloud native threat detection response, right, among the customers, apart from what we are seeing on the screen just now? Maybe we start with the lady first. Maybe Shira, can you have the view?
Thanks. So I think the challenge really varies according to the customer maturity level, organization maturity level. For Aqua, most of our customers are very large scale enterprises with a very strong presence in the financial industry. So what I see is some are totally not aware. SOC isn't involved. They're thinking that just, widespreading their traditional EDRs on the workloads is going to do the trick. And it's kind of worse than not even understanding that they're not covering and protecting these environments because it's a total blind spot, right? They think they're fine, but really the quality of their detection feed isn't good enough. They're focused on vulnerability management, compliance, all important things, but they're still stuck in that phase, as I like to say. So that's one part. The other organizations that I get to see are actually more mature. They understand that they need to have protection from real-time, like real threats and real attackers, and they're trying to protect from in-memory, rootkits, privilege escalation, all the things that they're used to talking about, but doing this in ephemeral environments where workloads are going up and down. Evidence collection totally changes is difficult. They have to kind of like rethink of their practices and how do they adapt to these changing environments. So just collecting evidence with a container that goes down is an issue, right? Or quarantine, something that SOCs are always accustomed to do. But if you quarantine a container, the orchestration level will just drop it. So I think that requires a kind of change and shift, and they're in that phase very much. And I think those are the challenges that I get to see.
Oh, sorry, Shauli, can you? What is your view on this?
So first of all, Shira is completely correct. If I need to add some more flavor to what Shira said, is for the more mature organizations, I think So companies have been going through this, I would say, maturity pyramid in cloud security. They started with like covering the basics, like shift left and, posture. And they now realize like every company that got like a CSPM in 2021, 2024 is now looking for a runtime solution. They kind of like, it's like the maturity, like it's like the Maslow pyramid of needs for humans. So also the same goes for security. But the problem is that when we think about cloud application detection response and attacks on the cloud, some of the fragmentation that we did for posture, even in the teams. So you have like cloud security team, you have application security team, you have infrastructure team, and the attackers. So when you just talk about posture, fixing this, fixing that, making each one as best as possible is great. But once you go into runtime security, the attackers, they don't care, right? They don't care that you have different technology stack, you have the infrastructure, you have the cloud, you have Kubernetes, you have container, you have application. And I think it actually relates to the slide that you shared, which is the attackers, they move across all of that stack layer. And one of the biggest challenges is to get a view that is across those layers because you have different teams and different technologies. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And another challenge is, I would say, seeing the forest from the trees. If I have to kind of like give an analogy, visibility is kind of like commoditized by now. Okay, visibility is easy. I'll show you everything that's happening in your environment. But we are reaching a point where we have so much visibility that we don't see what actually happens. And that's why I think the next phase of cloud runtime security the winners will not be about visibility. It will be about what I like to call explainability. Like what happened in my environment? Why am I seeing these alerts? And what is the flow that the attacker is going through? And it relates, of course, closely to the fact that you need to see across the different layers.
Perfect. Yeah. Then definitely. Stav, yeah, what is the idea?
Sure. So I think Shira and Shauli brought up great points, and I totally agree with them. For us, the way that we see customers, if you will look at the enterprise level, most of them transition to the cloud pretty fast, right? They drop tons of workloads from the on-prem to the cloud, where at the end they have a cloud which consists of several functions, Kubernetes, Windows workloads, and a bunch of other serverless technologies, as well as a lot of human identities, non-human identities, tons of stuff. Now, the first phase for most of those organizations, they would take all of the cloud audit logs, they would drop their EDR, CWP, whatever they have there, and they would ship all of those to the SIEM. Now, the SIEM is a great tool, which started in 2005. We're now in 2025, meaning 15 years, we're still using the same technology. Now, as Shauli mentioned, yes, most of them have visibility, but what does visibility mean? If you see a raw log, can you actually figure out what that means on the environment? Now, in most SOC organizations, I think that today they still don't really own the cloud, at least what we see. They will escalate most of the detections to the cloud security team, which is not actually the ones who should own it. And then at the end, if you look at it at a very high level, most SOC teams don't really own them up. They are having a very hard time on actually winning the battlefield. Now, trials and investigation is a totally complex beast in the cloud. And I think that using the tools that have been invented from what we have seen in on-prem is the biggest challenge right now for those teams to actually take that ownership. And that's why solutions like Aqua, ARMO, and Stream are here to focus on that area.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I agree with yours, because I think that is one of the key challenges for organization when we talk about cloud security, because I do believe that because organizations are now focusing much on, we say that the ship left, right, or a misconfiguration, more like visibility, right, how to fix the thing that in their infrastructure, in their application. So the next question would be, what are the gaps in understanding and awareness and the technology deployment, right, to address these cloud security challenges, right? You see that the organization focusing on wanted to detect a threat, but they're focusing too much on the left, and that I mentioned, right? Do you see that what we see that many organizations focusing too much on the left and unable to detect the threats, right, in real time. That's the key thing. Yeah, maybe Shauli, can you start first this question?
Yes, happy to. I would say that first of all, it goes back a little bit to the maturity pyramid that I spoke about before, which is posture is the easy part, right? It's the easy part. You can do it agentless in many cases, right? So you kind of like, Wiz created a $30 billion company based on that, on like how easy it is to kind of like do agentless posture. And it was great, and companies, because it was so easy, companies chased it and realized that it gives them a very quick coverage. Now, the more you start to kind of like anything, the more you learn about it, and the more attackers learn about it, you understand that a lot of what you see from the legacy solutions miss or give you too much information because they don't use runtime data, they can't protect data, and that becomes a big issue. CSPMs are, in my mind, they're kind of like becoming spam at this point. It's you get so many things to do. It's like they create a lot of work for you, and you will work forever chasing all of your vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. And I think that's why I think the kind of like the myth of like we'll fix everything in the left is getting broken. More and more people are realizing that it's an endless chase. Theoretically, it's amazing. But you know what they say about the difference between practice? In theory, there's no difference, but in practice, there is a lot of difference. So the theory is great, but it just doesn't work. And that's why companies are now moving to the right, understanding that, there's this concept of like shift left and shield right. And I think it's inevitable because I'm not saying don't do shift left, but you need to do it smartly, and you need to understand that you'll never be able to close all the loopholes.
Yeah, balance it, I mean. Yeah. Okay. Next, can I have the idea from Shira?
I want to kind of connect to what Shauli ended with the shift left. I think shift left had a big promise of developers taking ownership, right? And they would kind of lead security. I don't think that's going to happen. Yes, developers should do more than they did before to secure the code, but ultimately security has to take the reins and to lead this. So it starts off also with preemptive, proactive security, with enforcing your security guardrails, right? And not just giving good advice. I mean, cloud native modern applications, the whole idea is you're continuously developing and deploying all the time. So how can you guard effectively an environment that's ever changing? It's almost impossible. And I think the first key is, yes, we have to move as an industry and give more control to security, to lead proactive security and stand behind them. The other, when I'm looking specifically at threat detection and response, I think the main, and I think, Tien, you touched upon this a few times, the feeds are just not good enough. Threat detection in cloud looks different. It's very diverse. Cloud applications behave in a very unexpected way and changes all the time. So you could either lead to the point where there's a lot of false positives or a lot of false negatives, and both are very, very bad. I mean, alert fatigue is like the best tool for an attacker, right? If they have alert fatigue, they know that they can make headway. I get to see customers that are kind of asking for like general forensics. They just want to throw all these logs and stuff. I'm going back to what you were saying on you, and there's nothing. And then they come back to you a few months later and say, I don't really know what to do with this, right? So I think in terms of the technology, we also have to bring great threat detection that is adapt to cloud and containerized environments, but also make sense out of it.
Yeah.
Or like Shauli calls it, I think Shauli, you said explainability, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah. I like the word.
Yeah, I think the staff, the company very good at this one way. I think that Shira and Shauli touch on the point with CSPM and so on, shipment security. We talk about like the mismatch between the cloud detection and response with the what it calls as misconfiguration focus, vulnerability focus, right? Can you share the idea?
Yeah, so I highly agree that a lot of the organizations are still at the phases where they're figuring out how to protect the cloud, or in a better word, harden it, right? That is highly driven from compliance, right? A lot of the security practices at the end are driven from compliance, not actually protecting the environment. You hardened to pass compliances. Now, as Shauli and both Shira mentioned, you can have a perfect security posture, meaning that you have fixed all known vulnerabilities. You have all of their identities with dual MFA, even like handshakes or whatever it is. But still, you may have credential leakage. You may have sophisticated attack like brute force MFAs, and even the most sophisticated cloud native organizations like Uber have been breached through those attacks, right? Same thing can be a 0-day on your container or VM, meaning that no matter how hard you will try to harden your environment and you can be perfect, you may still be breached. Now, it depends if somebody actually wants to breach you at the end, because anyone can be breached. Let's be honest here. And then that means that at the end, you should focus on actually what's going on the runtime of your environment, at least as much or probably much more than what you do on the shift left, as we call it, since at the end, you will need to actually make sure that you understand what's going on, and not only the detection point itself, but actually having the ability to trace the entire story, because a detection can pop up, but it doesn't mean that actually that was the breach point. In many cases of organizations, you will see that, let's say the more mature ones will quarantine an asset immediately, but it might take them actually a week to figure out where was the breach point. And there were some pretty big threats and breaches happening to large enterprises in the past year where they detected the breach, but the threat actor came in back in a week later again to the environment and destroyed it totally because they actually weren't able to detect the breach point. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps as well in the industry, where you may detect as good as you can, and let's say you have unlimited amount of SOC engineers, but that doesn't mean that you will actually be able to protect yourself and find all of the entry points that the threat actor may have put into your environment.
Yeah, we talk about vulnerability. We talk about CSPM with ship ref and misconfiguration, right? And it's the compliance. Now let's talk about a bit about the cloud security and SOC, right? The security operations. So before, when we talk about the cloud security, SOC is often not part of the conversation, right? Because of the challenges that we discussed earlier, right? Like organization focusing too much on the cybersecurity, misconfiguration, vulnerability, and compliance management, right? This like normally falls under the purview normally the IT department, right? But that for like a cloud or application security team, right? Now we're talking more about real-time threat management, including detection, investigation, and response, right? So it should be like it should fall under the purview of SOC and the SecOps team. So what would be the key challenges, right, or the key gap in bringing the cloud security, right, closer to the current SOC environment? I think that is the biggest kind of a challenge for the organization to really modernize their cloud security operation, right? Because they have the gap in there, right? Maybe we start with like Stav first. Can you give the idea on the thoughts there?
Sure. I definitely agree, and I think you mentioned that in one of the slides, that there is still a pretty significant cloud security knowledge gap in the SOC, where most enterprise organizations actually invested a lot of money and time into building up those cloud security teams, which specialize in the cloud, understand their cloud environments, while the SOC has been left behind. During the, I think, past 12 months, what we have seen is that the organizations are starting to actually understand that. They have built those cloud security practices to actually harden the environments, and now they are bringing the SOC to those cloud environments. Now, closing a skill gap is something that is complex. You need to spend a lot of time, but while those people need at some point to start to actually detect, investigate, and respond in the environment. We believe that tools in that category, such as CDR, CNADR, are actually enablers to close the skill gap, as long as we as vendors do a good enough job to actually show the SOC team what is going on in the environment in a simple way that they can actually understand, then give them the automated triage that will actually explain them what is the potential open exploitability on an asset and what is the potential blast radius, so that they don't need to escalate at a very early phase of a detection, but they can actually, with time, take more and more responsibilities into those steps. Now, that's, I think, the biggest gap on us as vendors to help them close. And the cloud security skill gap itself will be closed as they take the ownership, understand what they actually have there. And that will bring organization to the manner where SOC teams at the end will be able to actually own the entire flow, while I still believe that the actual response side of the house, the actual quarantine operations will probably be done partially automated, or maybe by the DevOps team in the production environments, as at least from what we see, most organizations do not imply in production auto-remediation, at least at this moment of time. So you will still have partially automated on the simple stuff, but probably you will have that escalation process. But we as vendors should push it as far away as possible from the detection point to the actual remediation point.
Shira, no, sorry, what are thoughts on this? Maybe Shira, go first. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll say, first of all, Stav, I agree with every single word that you said. If maybe to add a little bit, I think the SOC is a reactive function. So it's not usually pushing for, they don't look at a specific part of the state. They have their security readiness, that's their KPI. And whether or not they have a blind spot, they're not really aware of it usually. I think the question is how much cloud security are proactive, how much they understand the difference between a virtual machine that's exposed to the internet that doesn't intra-SOC at all, or a real in-memory attack, just for example, or any of the stuff that you mentioned before, right? And if they are clear on differentiating that, and I agree that us as vendors have to help them do that, then they can operationalize the flow. I do think the SOC are very concerned about response, even though they don't usually use it as much as they think. And I think it's a question of how we can kind of pick and choose the most important response activities and internalize them in the way that the cloud is done, and have them not have to use an external, DevSecOps or anything like that. Help them close the loop by themselves, and then they'll feel confident in adapting that. And just one last point, I think AI applications could be the major disruptor here. I know we're always saying AI disruption around, but I think this specifically as well, because suddenly the blurry line between risk and incidents gets even more blurred. If you have a data leakage, does it matter if it's not an attacker or if it's an AI model? Suddenly, I think SOC is going to start looking at this, and I can see that happening already. And then maybe the next phase will say, okay, so what's running these AI workloads, these AI applications, the workloads, cloud workloads and containerized environments. That's the main infrastructure. And maybe that's going to also bring the SOC into more of a proactive approach of trying to find a way to protect that part of their state.
Sure. Sure.
I don't have maybe a little bit to add with, which is, everybody said it, the SOC team is a bit late to the game, right? In terms of, everything is going to cloud security or the application security, and many times those two are merging. What we see in many of our customers, like every customer, right? Every customer will say, hey, can you, send those alerts to my SIEM and to my SOC? And of course, yes, we will do that. But when an event really happens, who manages is not really the SOC. Like eventually the security team or the AppSec team together with the security team are the ones managing the alert. And I think it's there's a migration that is happening here. It feels similar to what happened a few years ago with DevOps and DevSecOps. So I think something similar is happening here, where either SOC and SecOps teams understand better cloud and be able to work better in cloud environments, or cloud security teams become better at the process of responding and detecting, which is, it's a different job, okay? So it's kind of like either the SOC team learns a new domain or the cloud security teams learns a new profession. And I think the right answer is, there's never a right answer, but I believe the right answer in this case is like SOC teams become, you know, better at managing cloud alerts, because the processes and all of the, you know, actions that need to be taken are very, very important, and they know that profession. So, and again, everybody talked about, you know, the fact that we as vendors need to make it easier for them to do that. I would just say that on response and even prevention, I actually see something a bit different. I see that in cloud native, because of the, you know, ephemeral nature of things, and because, you know, it's easier to close things and kill them and bring them back up. And also because runtime information today is so easy, relatively, I would say, easy to get. So prevention and response is actually, you know, I dare to say it's no longer like a bad word to talk about prevention and response. It's still early days, but I think that's going to be a big thing 2025, 2026.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we talk about the SOC, yeah, and some challenges. Yeah, it's a conventional cloud security. How do you see? Yeah, Shauli, you mentioned about the detection and response, right? The response is to be 2025 or 2026. So how do you see the concept of CNADR that I shared on the screen earlier, right? That's combine all this technology in CDR and ADR. The key thing is that for the platform or the framework that like have the unified data lake, the unified like response or analysis framework in there, right, to understand and detect all the the movement of the attacks, right, across all the cloud stack, from the cloud infrastructure to the workload up to the application layer, right? How do you see that concept in transforming the current cloud security operations moving on? And yeah, maybe we start with Shauli. You have any feedback in there?
Well, first of all, I'll start by saying I'm super biased, okay? Because like I'm a super believer, you know, in CNADR. I've built a company around it, so I'm disclaimer, right? I'm fully biased. But again, I think it's a critical thing to understand, and it goes back really to your first question and the idea that an attacker doesn't care, right? They don't care whether you have your application, your EDR, your container, your host, the cloud logs. They will move around, and if you need that explainability that I spoke about, you do need to have a sensor around all of those areas, and I believe CNADR is a necessity. Okay, I think any other solution that doesn't take all of that data together will eventually be too narrow in scope to actually give you the full story. If I needed to prioritize, well, all data is equally important. I think the hardest thing to build there is the ADR, but that's because it requires like deep, kernel, eBPF type knowledge to build. But in terms of the data, all of them are born equally, I would say, in importance.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I would agree with you with that. But but for some organizations, we should start with a CDR first, for example. Of course, for the whole picture, that we need to unify the framework in there. But Stav, what do you think?
It can be like it's a maturity thing, right? You start
yes.
CDR, you check the box. Again, it goes back to what I said about CSPM. CDR is easy, okay, relatively easy. You connect to CloudTrail logs and kind of like do analysis of them. It doesn't require an agent, so it's easy to adopt. So I could definitely see companies starting with that.
First move.
Yeah.
Stav.
So at least in the enterprise, I'll disagree a bit with Shauli. What we see in the enterprise is that they already have EDR and CWP deployed across the entire environment. Why? They have 10,000 endpoints running an EDR, they will traditionally go and take that and deploy that across their cloud. In many of them, Kubernetes is still small, because usually it's a shift and lift and then transform to cloud native. And then you have heterogeneous environments where, again, there are still Windows machines, many of them actually. And then the ability for a customer at the end to protect both the workload, the containers, the application, and again, any identity you have, whether those are service accounts or humans inside of it, and building that picture, I think that's definitely the first step to actually get that understanding and triage and actually being able to understand the entire story, because many of them have the tools. Now, ripping apart a known vendor from 10,000 endpoints is something that most organizations will not do. It will actually take them at least 2 years to do, to swap an entire solution across that. Now, they are traditionally, at least the customers that we see, they already ship all of those logs to the SIEM. And their main challenge is not whether they actually have a detection or not, because many times in most breaches, there were detections. They might be in low severities, high severities, but nobody was able to actually triage it and say, hey, we need to look at that right now. But they will actually get to know about the threat actor inside in a later stage, right? And they will have hard time to respond. So I think that the tooling and us as vendors should be able to actually integrate across the layers and cross solutions, because some organizations will choose, hey, I would want a single tool that will give me the entire thing. Others will say, hey, we are a best of breed approach. We want an EDR, a CWP, a CDR, and an ADR solution. We have customers like that as well, right? So like playing across that field, I think is important. And I think that allowing the SOC at the first phase to actually understand the map and triage, then the investigation phase, and then the response. I think the market is still at that phase. Cloud native companies, it's a different story, right? If you have a single workload with Kubernetes, yes, go and use ADR. That's your main, your Kubernetes is your main attack surface. But in the enterprise, it looks different, at least in the customers that we see.
Shira, what is the point in this?
I think the key here and what we're going to measure ourselves against, success will be measured if we manage to implement the feeds into the operational workflows. So, Stav, I agree with you. They're not going to pull out their traditional EDRs. And the truth is they don't need to. The broad estate has been built from different components, and part of them are what EDRs are built for, which is Windows endpoints. But when we're looking on Linux machine, we're looking on containers, and I actually see that containers, they're going up. It's not going, I mean, it's not, it's not a slow motion. This is very, very fast. And then I think the better we are with blending into their workflows, then we will see CADR, playing out the way you kind of described it. And I think for most vendors, we're stronger in one thing or two things than the third. And I think that kind of makes sense, because also, it depends on your risk appetite. For example, logs, they could also be very overwhelming, and the amount, and usually you cannot interact with it and, kill a process. I think, Shauli, like you were mentioning before, right? Saying, okay, we're not going to wait until this goes broader. So it depends on your risk appetite. It depends how proactive you want to be. And it depends how your operational workflow blends in well. I think SIEMs, and Stav, I'm going back to what you were saying, since 2005, that's a great, wonderful thing in the industry, that there are SIEMs. So if we are skilled enough to utilize it in a way that it's combining and bringing best of breed, then I don't see why organizations have to compromise on best of breed and leave these, blind spots as they are today.
Yeah, that also makes sense, because I think that's because I think the concept of CNADR are still in very, very beginning stage right now, right? And I think that the adoption of either CDR or CNADR, or even ADR, it actually depends on the maturity level after the cloud adoption, after the cloud security awareness as well, right? So, and how's the DevSec or culture, right, in the organization. We see the different, the practices, and so the separation of the dev team, DevOps team, and security operation team. No solution, no platform can help them, right? Because I think that it still remains one of the biggest barrier for improving the cloud security operations, right? Okay. Maybe we have the last question, right? Because we have very insightful and exciting discussion here. So the last question would be, like, how do you like advise or like provide offers a recommendation to CISO or CSO, right, to improve their like classic security operation, and especially like to understand the challenges, understand the security issue, and the benefit of the technology stack that we are discussing today, CDR, ADR, and CNADR, right? In helping them detect, investigate, and respond to the threats in the cloud effectively, right? And when we go first, or maybe Shira, maybe, yeah.
Okay. We're waiting for your cue. Yeah. I think
no one.
I'm a very strong believer in evidence collection. I think that the fact that workloads are ephemeral is a big blocker for SOC to be able to investigate and reach an MTTR. I've gotten to see a number of SOCs because they don't have all the evidence and they don't have the knowledge and the skills, then they just kind of overlook these feeds, even if they're coming into the SOC, okay? So I think the first, and something that we've invested a lot in and investing more, is having an automated evidence collection triggered by the alerts. So you get your file evidence, your process lineage, and you get even like a kind of selective memory dump of the container, all bundled up. So you have the evidence and you're not going back and trying to figure it out. And then you can use a bunch of, open source tools or other industry leaders in forensics. I've heard the word forensics in the last few months a lot more than before, right? So they're coming to the understanding that this is really needed, but nobody knows to picture that word in a very clear way. And the second thing I think is ownership. So if we are able, because the applications are so diverse, and the SOC or anyone can never actually be knowledgeable enough to figure out, should the application be behaving this way, shouldn't it? So yeah, we should surface up high severity alerts, like you were saying before, Stav, definitely. But there's also going to be the ones that are a little bit underlining. And there, if we can, it's something that we work on bringing, trace back an incident to the developer. So you also have a very short MTTR, but even more importantly, we're giving the SOC another ability to come to the developer and say, okay, we've gotten to the point where the way your application is behaving is too risky or too noisy. We're not going to just suppress this incident. We want you to change application behavior. And hopefully that's going to start cleaning the slates in an easier way. So less alert fatigue.
Stav?
So I think that like traditionally as security and many of the sales start at the CISO level, and at the end you're coming to sell a business, solve a business problem. I think that most CISOs today understand that threat detection and response is super important. I think that most of them invest in it because at the end, if you look at the SIEM market, it is the biggest market right now in cyber at the end, meaning that organizations actually invest a lot in it. But I think that most organizations are still figuring out that how they actually, because they already invested so much in detection and response in general as an organization, they're still figuring out like, how do we take that cloud practice in to the SOC or transition it, especially to the SOC. And for us as a vendor, we try to do our best job to actually educate on the fact that it doesn't need adding a solution to your budget. And many times, like adding it is not replacing it. You should add a new budget to that because maybe they already have something in place, and you can actually reduce costs. Right? Many organizations at the end in their traditions enable all of the cloud native detection feeds, whether AWS Guard Duty, Defender, in Google GCC, and then as a cloud, as a CISO at an organization, you can actually bring up tools that will do 1 + 1 = 3 by transitioning costs that are from existing detection tools that are great at the initial phases, but can actually not be sufficient enough for your team to use and outgrow. And this is a trend that we are seeing in the market.
Shauli, you will be the one that ends the question today.
Okay, so if I think about CISOs, I think they think in a different level. I don't think they think like detection and response or alerts, or that's not the way they think. I think we need to speak with them. The two most important things or concepts that CISOs I see are managing is one, the concept of risk, and the second one, the concept of how they build their organization. And I think Shira mentioned ownership, which is exactly that, right? If you define who is owning cloud security or cloud runtime security detection response, is it the SOC? Is it the cloud security team? Maybe, if I'm being like, if I'm now not a startup owner and I'm like a BCG, a consulting advisor to a CISO, I would say, create a task force that's the role. They need to define the strategy for cloud security in runtime. Maybe people from the SOC and people from the cloud security teams, and establish it together and build a way to go forward. I think that's one of the things. And eventually, if you talk about risk, I would say that any CISO's role is I always tell them there are three things you need to do in life, in general, in security. One, you need to identify your risk, and ideally you will identify real risk and not hypothetical risk with false positives and stuff like that. You need to mitigate risk, and that's where prevention and response is coming more into play. Wherever you identify it and you have risk, you need to mitigate it. And then you apply detection and response everywhere else. And what I tell every CISO that I meet, and I think that's how the industry should work, is, and I'll finish with that, is that we need to treat any application like it has a 0-day vulnerability in it. We need to have that mindset, because it probably does have such a vulnerability.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the time, and also answered all the questions that I have. So before we closing the session today, so we have one question from our audience. So the question is, in today's AI-driven world, how is the cloud security evolving with AI enablement, right? Are there any specific AI tools you would recommend for cloud security? Right? Any?
I'm willing to jump in.
Without speaking about AI. Shira, you are runtime AI. Let you start.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to start.
Yeah.
I think that there's two aspects of AI. One is how are we using and utilizing AI in order to get, better threat detection and response. And that is super important and has to be dealt with very carefully so we don't, create a lot of noise and false positives. So that's something that's in work, and it could be used greatly for explainability. You see, Shauli, this is going to be now my new language. That's one thing. The other aspect, to me, more interesting, because what we're focused on is securing AI applications. They're part of the same. If you're saying Tien ADR, this is the biggest ADR coming in, right? AI applications. So we are using our eBPF sensor in order to really detect and protect AI applications, hopefully using the same methods, because a lot of the difficulty is if we have to start implementing now new measures, new technologies, and most we do, that's going to create even more difficulty for our organization. So we're trying to consolidate, to really focus on, using the same technology, the same gatherer, the same agent, but bringing the value for the AI application visibility.
Maybe Stav, you had the idea.
Sure. So definitely, as Shauli mentioned, AI is a big topic in both using it as vendors to actually enable the customers to have better workflows, explainability, and actually having the agent suggesting the best potential way to respond to a threat, because you may respond at the container level, you may go to the WAF, you maybe have a Palo Alto firewall in your cloud, and you can actually respond there. We at Stream believe that the response should be actually on the perimeter. The further you can respond from the element, because that means that the downtime on the application will be the lowest. That's the way that we look at it. And then the idea of AI actually understanding both the posture in real time and the actual activities will gain the ability to go and respond on the perimeter, even maybe on your Cloudflare, depends on the setup. On the other end, actually protecting AI, I think that both doing that and runtime at and at the actual serverless layers. Like, most of the vendors are now pushing a lot of their own tools, which we won't be able to deploy any agents on, maybe just intercepting the interactions with them. So like the challenge is to actually see the AI from all of its elements and with the actual SaaS, which you are connecting to, which I think that the overall challenge of the SOC is going to become much harder, because it's not only about clouds, and we didn't get to that in the webinar, but at the end, when you talk with a CISO or a SOC organization today, they look at it behind the cloud. Like, you have the Snowflake in your serverless, you have a bunch of other applications that are interacting. So the challenge is actually going to become much harder than simple with AI, in my opinion.
Sure, you with me is the second time.
Yeah, I'm not gonna repeat. Just gonna add, like, those are the two main things, like using AI for protection and protecting AI workloads. If we take a step a little bit back, the additional two impacts of AI that I can think of is one, that the attackers are starting to use AI. So, the time between a vulnerability and a breach is becoming much, much shorter. And also, AI usage, and I'm being very broad here, in the organization in general, not just in your cloud environment, which might also, for the person who asked the question, there are, a breadth of companies addressing those aspects, of course, and they should also be looked at.
Great, sure. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining this discussion today. So this is one of the most exciting part of the series that we have ever had for the cybersecurity webinars. So very engaging, very exciting discussion today, especially for the new emerging kind of technology like CNADR or ADR, that's bringing the cloud security to the SOC, or the SOC to the cloud security. So thank you so much, all right, for the time. And we're very, very happy to have Shira, Shauli, and Stav, right, for our discussion today, right? So for our listener, if you enjoy this conversation, share it with your peer. And thanks for listening today. If you have any question, please contact us, and do not forget to mark the calendars for the upcoming cybersecurity webinars. Okay. For that, thank you so much.